On to borders, our top story of the morning. So Queensland's starting to wind theirs back, softening its stance a little bit. South Australia potentially opening up to New South Wales tonight unless there is one case of community transmission.
Well, that's just absurd.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
You can't even... How are you supposed to plan a holiday? Do they want people to come or not?
Yeah.
There's 8 million people in New South Wales and one case of community transmission. You're going to shut them down again?
Yeah, well, because that's eventually going to happen, right? And this is the point that Gladys Berejiklian makes, is that Queensland wants to keep its border shut to New South Wales unless there is 28 days without community transmission. It's basically saying, well, see ya.
They changed that to 14 days. I had a feeling
I think they were even still, 14 days is probably a stretch. And again, Berejiklian thought that too.
Yeah, look, I mean, what are the chances?
Yeah.
And New South Wales is shouldering all the burden when it comes to hotel quarantine, the overseas travellers. So, of course, they're going to get the odd community transmission case, but they've shown with their tracing and quick testing. I had a test last week, result back negative in 11 hours when I had a cold. So if I did have it, you can isolate every single person I've been in contact with the last 3 or 4 days. They show how you can get on top of an outbreak, so it just doesn't affect the population. I mean, you can go to pubs and restaurants in Sydney, you have no fear at all.
It's interesting. I'd noticed that the restrictions that Boris Johnson announced overnight in the UK, there was the expectation that it was going to be a big wind back, but in the end, he's basically trying to live with the virus, and it's shutting off pubs and restaurants at 10 p.m, so you can still go to them. But they close at 10 p.m, wear masks out in public, kids can go back to school. It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not there, though. But, I mean, I guess the point you're making, which is a pretty valid one, is we've got such low numbers here.
Yeah.
And yet everyone's still scared of the virus. They're treating, like, 5 cases a day as if it's 500 in some states of Australia.
Let's go.
It's just illogical.
Hey, was that your first test?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you had one?
Yeah, I have. It tickles a little bit.
It wasn't that bad. Well, everyone said it was so bad.
Yeah.
They shove it so far up that by the time I had it, I was like, well, this isn't that bad.
No,
so
it's
good to think it's
pleasant
going
surprise.
to be.
Yeah, I had some anxiety.
They swizzle it around.
Yeah, it's the best thing to do as long as you relax. It just tickles a little bit.
I think about blue skies.
It's very unusual. It's an unusual feeling, though. Let's go to your scoop from yesterday. JobKeeper is coming. The tap's turned off next March.
Yeah, well, that's what the budget papers are going to say. There's no more allocation towards it, and it's been put to me it's highly unlikely that in January or February they'll announce an extension. Who knows, though? I thought they'd just keep it going and have an election late next year, but it doesn't seem that way. The budget papers will say it ends. And there is a view in government that eventually you have to take this income support out, that there's some zombie companies operating and that you have to have a proper labour market correction. It's going to be difficult when they do. And there's going to be other spending in the budget to try and ameliorate that and create jobs. But ultimately, there has to come a time JobKeeper comes off. And at the moment, their intention is the end of March.
Well, what happens if there is another explosion in cases and there's a state shutdown again?
Then they'll extend JobKeeper.
Yeah.
But look, we hope that doesn't happen. And frankly, the only place that's going to happen is Victoria if their contact tracing and testing is not up to speed. But the federal government at least believes that they're now on top of that, Victoria. And I've even seen on social media people saying, gee, the tests are quicker. I'm now getting a text message saying I don't have it. Everything's a lot more efficient. So let's hope that's the case.
Speaking of social media, Kevin Rudd's been active this morning. This is on the NBN announcement coming up later on today. Paul Fletcher, I think he's doing his press conference in half an hour's time. But basically, he's accusing the government of backflipping on this one. And it all relates to fibre to nodes. I've got no idea what that means.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to get your head around. Look, I mean, essentially, if you're going to spend money on the NBN or any sort of stimulus like that, now is the time.
Yeah, right.
I say only $4.5 billion. $4.5 billion is a lot of money, but compared to what the economy kind of needs and what we've seen so far, it's not that much. And look, I mean, I've been impressed in this pre-budget period about how Scott Morrison and his team have handled the announcements. Every couple of days there's another announcement. These guys are really good at this. They're really good at having the Morrison agenda to the fore, and Labor's nowhere to be seen. And sometimes it's only a couple of billion over 10 years or something. It won't even make that much difference, but they get a good run. And if it is a bit of a back down, so be it. The more stimulus, the better in this time. I mean, unfortunately, at some point, we're going to have to pay it all back. But at the moment, that's what the economy needs.
I think Jonathan Lee raised a fairly good question earlier in the program when he suggested, you know, why should the people have to pay extra for this faster broadband when the government's spent some $51 billion on it so far?
Yeah, well, someone's got to pay. I mean, I'm sort of more in the user pays column than the we all pay
that's where
through
Andrew
our
Bragg
taxes.
was too, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not quite Andrew Bragg. I don't think we should all have our super cancelled, but, you know.
Well, he doesn't necessarily want it cancelled. He just wants to keep it as low as possible.
I thought he wants no super for anyone, no compulsory super at all.
No, he's a supporter of superannuation, but at its lowest possible point. At least that's my take out of it anyway. And his beef with the super agencies is companies is that they charge too many fees.
Well, that's probably true, but the government can do things about that without throwing out, the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, all right. Andrew Clennell, good to talk as always. Chat